First, every voice matters. Secondly, it's also about enhancing decision making. Thirdly, language accessibility. And finally, it's also about customer-centric approach.
Good morning and welcome to our webinar about Confero interpretation. Today we will talk about all the changes and updates that we have done on the interpretation configuration in Confero, plus give you an update of what's coming for the rest of the year. And today I'm glad to be joined by Jonas.
Hi, I'm glad to be here, Bruno.
So Jonas is the expert from our R&D department who will give a more hands-on demo of what has been done and what's upcoming. Before we start, just a summary of what we are doing. So the webinar will take approximately 30 minutes and make sure to watch out for the polls and quiz questions, which give you an opportunity to win an Amazon gift card. Content of this webinar is we will first start with a short summary of what and why multilingual use cases are relevant, how interpretation is used, where it's used, why it's used, and by who. To explain this a little bit further, we'll give an overview of the Televic product ranges and all the products that are involved in a setup with language interpretation, and then do a deep dive on the actual configuration and setup. So this will be a hands-on part of the webinar where we will actually show how to set up and configure and use a multilingual conference setup. As you know, the Televic systems are used in different contexts, different situations. And this ranges from large institutions with formal meetings where there's formal agendas, a chairperson managing the meeting, voting, interpretation, all being combined and used as well. But it's not limited to that. It also ranges to more often smaller meeting rooms, which are more in an informal context and support hybrid meetings as well. Think corporate environments, for example, like a boardroom where this is very much applicable. But in essence, the core of what we are doing is to make sure that we create a better understanding, making sure that everybody's heard, that everybody's voice is intelligible, that we can understand, hear, and communicate in a very fluent way with each other. And that obviously includes interpretation as well. And if we look at who is participating in a room, we can make a distinction between the local participants who are actively participating in a conference room, but those are accompanied by remote participants who connect via a laptop or a Teams or a Zoom call, for example, who need the same type of facilities, the same support with regard to interpretation channels that needs to be available to them as well. We must make sure that the remote participant and the local participant are treated equally from a technological point of view. And let's not forget the observers in a meeting. In typical large conference halls like this, we have an active participation of a meeting on the podium, but there are a few hundreds or thousands even participants in the room that are listening to the reinforced audio, including different translations and interpretation channels. And of course, it's not limited to the participants who use the meeting ad hoc, but there are also recordings and support for press through customized boxes like this, where the press can plug in their audio recording devices directly into the Televic system, select which channels they want to listen to, and take that recording in the highest available quality back home with them, including live transmissions. Now, if we look at the different verticals that we are active in, one obvious that is applicable for interpretation are, of course, institutions, where by the nature of the organization, they support multilingual meetings and setups, so the role of interpretation is quite important there. But this also applies in a very similar way to larger rental events, with a major difference is the ease of setup and configuration, which is very important there. These type of events are built up in a few days, turned down again, and then rebuilt in different locations. So the ease of configuration and managing multilingual meetings is very important in this case or scenario. And as I mentioned, as another example of a more informal type of meeting room, very often are a courtroom, which are becoming more and more internationalized as well, and where the support of interpretation is quite important to make sure that everybody can defend their rights in a proper way. And if you're looking at various countries, Belgium is a prime example of that, is a multilingual country, so the interpretation there is core of the setups. And we see this evolution across the globe where there is very often support for indigenous languages that are also provided through interpretation in the system. Of course, if you want to provide interpretation, you need interpreters, and those interpreters need equipment. And the prime tool for an interpreter is our Lingua interpreter desk. It's one of the devices that we're very proud of, and it's very easy to integrate this into a conference setup. So this is a simplified technical diagram of a conference room, and the interpreter desks are just connected, just like any other Plexus device, into the system through using the Cat5 shielded cable, where you can create one or multiple branches or loops connecting those interpreter desks. The interpreter desk itself has been designed in cooperation with interpreters, so with support for auditive feedback, braille, tactile references on the touches. And we are very happy that we won some awards, design awards with this product. But most importantly, the device is also fully ISO compliant. Important to know, there are two variants of this device. One is the multimedia version, which has a built-in HDMI output, so that if you are using the Plexus system with video, that you can directly connect any screen to the interpreter desk and bring low latency lip-synced video to your interpreters immediately, without any additional cabling or setup, just using the Plexus system as is. The system itself with Plexus devices is very flexible, and we want to highlight some of the devices that are used in the system and how they can support multilingual events and setups. First of all, we have our wired devices. Just like the Lingua interpreter desks, these are connected through a Cat5 cable. You just connect the devices, daisy chain them into a loop or a branch into the system, and then they support all the audio channels, voting capabilities, etc. And this applies for all wired devices. So this includes the Unicos range. Important here is as well both the standard Unicos Pro device as well as the newly introduced Unicos Core device have full support for interpretation channels. The wired Flex device is capable for listening to interpretation channels and can also be used in a dual delegate mode. And then there are the Configurator flush mount devices with a channel selector that can be integrated seamlessly as well. So again, highlighting that mix and match of different devices. All of these devices by default are using a 3.5mm jack for audio headsets, but can also be equipped with an XLR connector if that's needed for the custom devices. So the channel selector is available on those devices. All devices have a volume adjustment button for the headset, and the Plexus system can support up to 64 different audio languages if that is a requirement. Very similar to the wired Plexus devices, we have our wireless range. So that is connected in a very similar way. We have a wireless access point, the G4 access point, which you connect over the same Plexus cabling to the central unit, and then that one communicates wirelessly with either the Configurator Go or the Configurator Flex wireless units in the system. Important here is the Configurator Flex G4 also supports that language channel selector, but is limited to 8 language channels in parallel due to bandwidth restrictions. Just like the wired Flex unit, it supports the 3.5mm audio jack for the headset, and just like the wired version, can be used in a dual delegate mode where 2 delegates share the same units for the participating into the meeting. The only device that is not capable of the language channel selection is the Configurator Go, which does not support the voting and interpretation channels. If we talk about the observers in the room, we actually have two solutions. The first solution that I want to introduce to you is the Unite solution. And Unite, again, it's very similar for all of our devices, can also be connected to the central unit. It's again a wireless access point that in this case is connected via Dante to the central unit, and then that one manages the wireless access point, wireless devices. What are the capabilities of Unite? It supports up to 4 languages with 1 access point. So a total of 8 access points can also be combined, and that means that you have up to 32 channels that you can use for audio distribution in a room. All communication is secured, so there's AES-256 bit encryption on the device. So there's no way to tap into the audio signal and listen to what's happening in the room. The communication itself is DECT-based, which is license-free. The device manages its frequencies automatically. It has a very wide operating range, and the range of the devices is up to 30, 40, 50 meters internally, 300 meters without any interference. So it's very flexible to set up and manage without prior knowledge. The body packs that the delegates are using, again, equipped with the standard 3.5mm audio jack for a headphone, and they also support a OLED display that gives you a way to select the channel that you want to use, gives you an update on the battery status and the service menus that are available in the device. There's an operating time of more than 15 hours with this device, so it's plenty to support full-day meetings without any need to recharge the device. This is an example of a room where the Unite system was used. So it's the Mahatma Mandir Congress Center in India, where there were 8 languages used into the system. So in this overview, we see on the left, we see the Plexus system, Plexus AER. There are 7 audio interpretation channels that are being used in combination with the delegate units for the people on the stage or on the podium, and plus 1 floor channel, obviously. So on the right, what you see is that what is used for the language distribution in the room, there are 2 access points, so the 7 interpretation channels plus the floor channel, and the audience is using the Unite body packs to listen to either the floor or one of the interpretation channels. Again, this was a very large room, up to more than 6,000 square meters, and it was serviced with 2 Unite access points. An alternative to Unite that most of you will be familiar with as well is an infrared or Lingua IR solution, which, again, just like all of our products, can be easily added to an existing Plexus setup. In this case, again, like with Unite, it's coupled over Dante, where the transmitter is configured. That one is linked with the radiators and the wireless Unite receivers, IR receivers, that are used by the delegates. Just like Unite, it comes with a charging case. In this case, you also have the radiators, and there's a management software that is available as well. The IR receivers are compliant with the ISO channel codes, can support between 6, 12 or 40 channels to listen to the audio, and can be used interchangeably with equipment from other vendors. So if you have a room with radiators from another vendor, our receivers can be used there as well, or the other way around. The IR receiver as well comes with a rechargeable battery with a lifetime of 20 hours of continuous use. So again, supporting full-day meetings without any issue. The radiator itself is, we distinguish ourselves with it being quite lightweight and easy to mount and carry. So especially if you are in a rental setup or rental context, it's very easy to set up the system, just one person, the weight is very low, they're very compact to carry around in cases, so very easy to manage. They come with standard VESA mounting options, and the LED can be turned on and off automatically. The transmitter itself includes a web server to manage the system, to set up the languages, etc. There is no knowledge on AR needed. It's very easy to use. The only requirements that you need to set it up is a browser connected to the system. And that also includes the coupling over Dante, but also the automatic delay line compensation. So that is configured in the web interface. And what does this mean? Is that you do not have to worry at all about the length of the different coax cables that you use between the transmitter and the radiators. So the system automatically calculates the different lengths, implements the delays that are required so that all the radiators are synchronized automatically. So again, no human interaction is needed, just have it configured automatically and you're ready to go. Now, you may ask, Unite, infrared, they seem very similar, but when do we choose one solution or the other? And Unite is, infrared at least, is something that stops at a wall. So one very interesting advantage is if you have a multi-room setup, all with an infrared radiator in there, the same language channels, infrared is very easy. You walk from one room to the other room, the IR receiver just switches to the other radiator and you're listening immediately to the audio distribution in that specific room. So very easy for the delegate in that case. There's no action from the delegate to switch to audio channels at that point. Unite, on the other hand, does go beyond walls, and that's one of the advantages. If I mentioned that large Congress Center before, there's no issue with the line of sight. It's a radio signal, so it penetrates a lot more than you don't need the line of sight signal that you have with infrared. It's encrypted, so even if you are in the room, you cannot tap into the audio signal if that's something that you would want to do. And it works perfectly in outdoor, so there's no impact of sunlight whatsoever, and you can combine multiple systems into one room. So, first quiz, and I'm sure you'll be able to answer this. Which of the following devices does not allow an interpretation channel? So which device does not have a channel selector available on the device? Is that the Unicos Core, the Confidia Flex G4, or the Confidia Go? Or is it the Confidia Flex wired device? I'll give you some time to answer. Please answer in the poll section and not in the chat. Thank you. So, after this quick poll, we did not yet talk about hybrid participation or remote participants, and that's where our Confero Meet platform comes in. So, as you may know, Televic has its own hybrid meeting management platform. Which again, and this is a recurring thing in my story, can be added by just adding an extra part of the equipment. So in this case, Applix is a gateway device that is added into the setup, and then remote participants can connect over the internet through the cloud to the meeting platform, participate in votings, listen to interpretation channels, and discuss in the meeting just as if they were on site. The Confero Cloud solution consists of three main components. One, Confero Plan to plan the meetings, the agendas, etc. in advance. Confero Meet, which is used during the meeting to distribute the audio and the video to the online participants. And Confero Cam as an in-room camera tracking system that automates the camera tracking depending on which microphones that are activated. The Confero Meet online web interface is accessible through a standard browser like Google Chrome and offers you all the same functionality as a physical delegate unit would bring. So this includes the capability to ask for the word, to request to speak, to do a voting. Even as a chairperson, you can be fully remote. And this meeting management platform has also been extended with the channel selector, which you can see at the bottom right on the on the screenshot, where you can dynamically select which language that you want to listen to as well. Now, of course, there are other remote participation platforms that are available. Let's think about Zoom, Teams, which are used very often, especially in a corporate context. And again, this is quite easy to add. So in this case, we add to the setup a Zoom meeting room PC, for example, or a Teams meeting room PC, which gets the audio through Dante again from the central unit. So there's a bidirectional audio exchange between those two, and then participants can log in remotely via the cloud, via Teams, via Zoom, onto the platform as well and listen and hear the audio. This is not limited to just the discussion audio, the floor audio, but you can also extend this by adding the interpretation channels and injecting those into a Zoom or into a Teams call, and then you can just select the language as a remote participant, just as you would do otherwise. This works both ways, by the way, so if you have a Zoom interpretation available or Teams interpretation, those can also be injected into the conference system, into the language channel, so that the participants in the room can listen to the remote interpreter that is active through Zoom or Teams. So this brings us actually to the live part, or the interesting part of this demo. So this is where Jonas will take over and give you a hands-on experience or demo of what Confero interpretation can do, all the things that have been evolved and changed over the year, and how we can move forward. So I give the word to Jonas to move further here.
All right, let's go into the live demo. I'm going to show you how to set up your system for the first time. So creating the boots, adding interpreter desks to those boots, and then assigning each booth to an appropriate language. Let's go. All right, so this is the main view in Confero, the login dashboard. I will log in as a technician, and then I will navigate to the room page. In this room page, there is a booth tab, and in this booth tab, I can configure my boots. Now, there are two easy ways to configure your boots. The first way is to add the boots up front, give them a name, and then assign the desks to those boots later. But another way is to do that by using the reordering mechanism. So when I press this button, a pop-up appears, and we can press and hold the microphone buttons of the interpreter desks. Now, there's an easy way to combine multiple desks onto the same boot, and that's by pressing and holding the buttons. So in this case, I press the first interpreter desk, and I hold the microphone button, and then I press the second, and then I just release. And now those two desks are combined into the first booth. We can do the same process for the next booth. You will see it in the background that they are added to new booths. All right, that's done. So I'll close this window, and then I can add a label to my booths. For now, I will call them A, B, and C for simplicity. And that's that. So the boots are created, the desks are inside. If I do want to make another change, I can still do it by dragging and dropping desks to other boots, but let's go back. All right, the next step then is to look at the interpretation channels. This is an interpretation configuration where there are already 3 languages plus the floor configured. Now it's very easy to assign each booth to a language, for example, A to French, B to Korean, and C to Japanese. If I want to restructure, reorder the languages, that's very easy to do. I can do that by dragging and dropping, like this. All right, once I press save, all the settings are saved. So that's the first step in a new installation. We create the boots, add desks to the boots, and then assign the boots to the languages we need in our meetings. Let's go back to the presentation. And then there's a poll. The question is, what is your preferred way of assigning a lingua ID to a booth? Is it in the Confero software? Is it automatically during installation or initialization? Or both are useful, but it depends on the situation. Let me give you some time to answer the question. All right, great. Let's go to the next demo. The next demo is about ambience. So ambience microphone, what's the use case? Well, interpreters, they are listening to typically the floor or another interpretation language. Now, if nobody is speaking on the floor, it could give the impression that there's a problem with the audio in the room. And that's where ambience microphone comes in the picture. Ambience microphone is a microphone somewhere in the room that can or will be activated only when nobody is speaking in the room. So this makes sure that the interpreters, they can listen some of the background noises in the room and that they know the system they are using is functioning correctly. Let's have a look on how to configure this in the software. This is done in the audio part and mainly in the audio part. So let me go to the webinar preset that I prepared and to the routing tab. If I press edit, I can add a input group, and it's a special kind of ambience input group. Let me give that a name, just A and B for now, and then I can add one of the auxiliaries in this case, for example, or a Dante. I can add it to the group and save. Now this ambience input group is created, but it's not attached or linked to any other group. Now for interpreters, the ambience input is important, but not so for the delegates in the room. The delegates in the room, they don't need to hear the ambient noise because they are in the room. So for that, we create a special floor channel for the interpreter desks. If we create this one, then we can link the floor input to the interpreter floor and then connect the ambience input group. What this means is that when nobody is speaking, the ambience input will be activated and will be used to link or to mix the audio and distribute it to this special floor only for interpreters. All right, let's press save, and that's that. And let's go to the presentation again. So that was ambience. All right, let's go to the next demonstration, which is about recording. So the people in the room, they listen to the floor, but if they don't understand the floor, then they listen to one of the interpretation channels. Now for recording, we don't need such a mechanism to switch between either the translated channel or the spoken language in the room. For recording, we want actually the dry channel, so only the interpretation channels without mixing of the floor if there's no active translation being done on that channel. Now in that case, we need to create dry channels in the audio routing, and I'll show you how it's done. All right, so we're back in the audio routing page. Again, I have selected our webinar preset, and if I edit the preset, I can uncollapse the language channel. So here you see the submatrix related to everything about languages. We see that the orange nodes indicate that those are backup nodes, meaning if on the first language no interpreter is actively translating, then the backup node will be active and the floor will be mixed into this channel. This is very convenient for the people in the room because they don't have to constantly switch back and forth between the language that they want to listen to or the floor. But as I mentioned before, for the interpretation recording, this is not useful. You don't want to have the switching or the mix of floor and the interpretation channel in the recording. Now to be able to do that, you can add a special kind of group, which is a custom language group. You can assign that group to one of the languages that you want, and then you can add one of the available outputs. It could be an auxiliary or a Dante if a Dante card is available in your system. So let me choose auxiliary in this case. This one has been added, and I can do the same thing for example, the second language, like this. And now I add the third Dante or the third auxiliary output. You see that there are no backup nodes for these custom language groups, I can still add those backup nodes if I want to, but in this case, for this use case, for the dry channels for recording, we don't need to do that. Once I press save and activate, it will be applied and the dry channels can be recorded. I can still verify the setup by uncollapsing the language submatrix. Alright, on to the next and final demo, which is about external interpretation. Up till now, we created boots, we added desks to those boots, and then assigned those boots to each language channel. Now, those are all local boots, which means the interpreters are in the room, well, in the boots next to the room, and they are in person at the location. Now, suppose there is an issue with one of the or multiple interpreters, for example, the French interpreters, and they can't make it in person for that particular meeting. Now, the people in the room still need to have the French translation to be able to participate in the meeting. Well, in that case, external interpretation is used. In external interpretation, the audio, the translated audio, is coming from an external device, a service like Teams or Zoom, for example, and the interpreters are at an external location. Now, let me show you how you can set up Confero to be able to cope with such a situation. Alright, we're back in the audio configuration. The preset is still open. And what's important here is if we want to inject audio into our system, we need to look at the input groups. So for example, for the French interpreters, they are at the first language. So I have a look at the first language in the audio matrix, and there I can add one of the available audio inputs. Let me select maybe the second auxiliary input, press save, and now that input is connected to the first language. Now it's very important to notice this input is not yet active. And why is that? Let me first apply the changes. If we go back to the interpretation configuration, we see that the source, the audio source of the French language is still configured as booth, meaning the audio will be coming from the local booth. To change that and to change to the external input, I just have to press external here and save, and you will see the boot is gone and the external audio input will now be used as the main source of the audio. Right, time for another quiz question. What step is not necessary to use external language injection? Is it configuring the external audio source in the language input, set a language channel to external, or create an extra language channel for the remote interpreter? Let me give you some time to think about that. All right. Now, here's a summary of what we just saw. You might have seen in room and boot setup that the booth configuration and the language management have been separated. So that's actually a new thing. And we did that because it might seem convenient at first that they were both combined into a single view, but it had a downside that you could lose your booth configuration if you changed the languages. So that has been changed, and now they're separated for a clear separation of control. We also saw interpretation configuration. Language channel configuration can be done at any time, and you can enable or disable external languages with a single click. And functionality has been gradually increased over the last year and still will be further extended with new functionality. And this is the next slide, in fact. New functionality. We are going to remove the limit of 11 languages. So currently there's still a limit of 11 languages in Confero. That will be removed. We will allow to configure default boot settings like how do the microphones in the same boot react when they are both pressed. And we will also allow the creation of presets of the interpreter configuration so that you can experiment with multiple presets, multiple sets of languages, and other settings.
Okay, thank you, Jonas, for this very comprehensive
You're welcome.
explanation of all the features that have been added, because as we mentioned before, there were a lot of smaller changes that have been added over the last year.
Yep.
And it's very good to have this summary again. What all of you are probably wondering is, when do we get our hands on this? So everything that Jonas has, or almost everything that Jonas has shown already in the live demo, will become available with the Confero 7.16 release. That's the same release that we mentioned before in the video routing webinar, the previous webinar, which is planned for end of summer, so end of August, beginning of September. That release will become available on our website. If you subscribe to the software updates newsletter on our website, you will get a notification on that website, on that release as well. This webinar and all previous webinars that we mentioned and that you want to look back to can be found on our website. So just browse to televic.com and search for the webinars, and you should be able to find them. Or just Google Televic and webinars and you'll be redirected immediately to the correct page. If you aren't already, please also make sure to follow the socials. So we have a LinkedIn account, YouTube, Facebook. Make sure to look this up, follow us, and you'll be continuously updated with all the news and updates that we are providing to you. On the webinar page that I mentioned to you before, you'll also find a link to register for the following webinars, and we hope to see you back again then. See you again next time, and that's it for today. Bye.
First, every voice matters. Secondly, it's also about enhancing decision making. Thirdly, language accessibility. And finally, it's also about customer-centric approach.